Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we are looking at Ozymandias, which is one of the 15 poems for power and conflict. Now, what is Ozymandias about? It's a poem in sonnet form by the romantic poet Percy Shelley. And it was written as part of a friendly competition with his friend Horace Smith in 1817. Now, what we are going to do in this video is we are going to look at the title, the significance of the title, the structure, the ideas and language as well. Now, moving on, in terms of the title, why is it called Ozymandias? And what does Ozymandias mean? So first of all, Ozymandias is the name given to Ramesses II. So Ramesses II, who was a powerful leader at the time. And he was one of the greatest pharaohs of ancient Egypt. And in the early 19th century, when Shelley was writing poetry, Europeans became fascinated with Egyptian culture after Napoleon conquered Egypt and began transporting the great treasures of the ancient Egyptians back to Europe. They decided to have a competition to see who could write the best poem about the statue. So this is the significance of the title. Now, in terms of structure, so just to touch on here, structure, how is the poem structured and organized? Now, the poem is a sonnet, and once again, it's one stanza. There's one entire stanza, and the poem is written directly to the reader, okay? And the poet speaks secondhand about the experience. It is actually a traveler he has met who has seen the statue for himself. And the image of the statue is described and built up in sections until we can imagine the entire thing. And the poem ends not with the discussion of the greatness of the pharaoh, but with the image of the lonely desert where nature has reclaimed her place. That's to do with the structure. In simple terms, it's one stanza. Now, in terms of language and the ideas, so language and ideas, there are certain things that you can pick out and talk about in your exam. So what are they? So they include the following. So as you know, Ozymandias is a poem written in first person. And while Shelley often wrote about the beauty of nature, here in this poem, he chooses to write about the ferocious forces of nature. Ozymandias, or also known as Ramesses II, was one of the greatest leaders of the ancient Egyptian world. The people of his time would have thought of him as a god on earth. Many massive statues were created in his honor, and it is probable that the Egyptians themselves imagined that they would last forever. In the poem, however, as you read it, you acknowledge that we see the destructive forces of time and nature. So the significance in this poem is time and nature. These are two key themes or key areas for you to look at. Now, what's important here is that there was this once great civilization which ruins this great statue into pieces. So the statue itself of Ramesses II is damaged, is dismantled. And what is the message within this poem? The poem is a warning about arrogance. Okay, so often when we read poems, there are hidden messages, and the message here is more of a warning. It's a warning about what? It's a warning about arrogance. Okay, it's a warning about arrogance and pride. Okay, in the face of unstoppable natural forces. Okay, so this is something for you to consider and look at. The poet speaks directly to the reader about a traveler he has met. The traveler has told him about a great ruined statue in the desert. We get impressions of the statue and the man who built it. There are certain phrases which pick out, you may want to look at, which include sneer of cold command. So this is a key quotation for you to discuss and analyze. So sneer of cold command, this again shows us that Shelley disapproves of the pharaoh. He seeks to paint him as an arrogant and cruel character who cared little for his subjects. Now, this quotation here is an example to support that. He pronounced himself King of Kings. That's again a key quote within the poem. I'm just going to write this as well in green. So if I just zoom out slightly, I can add this here. So King of Kings. So why is that significant? This shows you that Ozymandias had the pinnacles of power. He thought to himself that he was invincible. But what we realize is towards the end, the brutal reality shows you that mankind has to experience death, and rather, no one is king. So this is the message that's being illustrated here. And he pronounced himself King of Kings, which is showing his arrogance, his power, and his pride. And his pride is shown to be pointless. He says on the sculpture, "Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair," in an effort to put fear into the hearts of his enemies because of his great power and ability. Now, since the statues are now destroyed, his life's work ruined by the passage of time, people will more likely despair at the transitory nature of such power. This power that he yielded was fleeting and unimportant in the vast scheme of time. And also another important quote, I'm just going to write on the top here, so maybe you can just add it on here. Nothing beside remains. Nothing beside remains. So this is another important quote which you can look at. Now, why is that important? Because it finishes off this idea stating in a simple way the finality of the destruction. And the caesura here adds to this sense of finality. So everything must come to an end. Shelley, again the poet here, uses language throughout the poem that impresses us with the ruined state of the statue. When he describes the statue, he uses the technique of personification. So we need to look at how the poet uses personification. So just to remind you all, personification is the comparison of something that is not human with human characteristics. And now, why is that used? It's as though the statue has been alive at some point, but is now dead and decaying. For example, to show this, an easy quote to refer to here is the trunkless legs. Okay, so that quote in itself is an example of using personification. Okay, and also wrinkled lip, that's another one. So that's another example of personification. And the final lines of the poem revert to speaking of the desert itself, using the alliterative phrases boundless and bare. Okay, so we've got examples of alliteration as well. So that I mentioned just now is boundless and bare. So boundless and bare. So why is that used? Okay, it's used to enhance the sense of the emptiness, the constant sameness of the desert in which the statue stands. And ultimately, it is the desert that has vast power and survives the centuries. So this is a breakdown or a summary of Ozymandias by Percy Shelley. I hope this gives everyone a better understanding of the poem. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like and share for more education related videos. Thank you.